Let's continue our journey after I've given you all that bad news about what it is to be a projector. Yeah. What to do.
Now you're going to give us the good news.
Really? Optimism's a wonderful thing. It really is. And being that I have a 5 personality, you can project anything you like. And I'll deliver whatever happens. I've tried many times I do a lot of stuff that I call rave history or rave cosmology. I have an interest in the evolutionary pattern as a whole, and to see the way in which the pieces fit into the puzzle and the way in which these things work. And one of the areas that is so interesting is understanding that where we're going mutatively is we're going towards a world that will in many ways be dominated by pentas. And because we're moving towards a world that's going to be dominated by pentas, that it's so clear that the gift of what it is to be a projector becomes something that's really significant. Let me put it in another context. In human design, we have something called global cycles. It's our way of being able to follow the precession of the equinox and be able to see the larger shifting of evolutionary cycles. We're in a cycle now that's called the cross of planning. That's the 40th gate, the 37th gate, the 9th gate, and the 16th gate. And we've been in the cross of planning since 1615. That's a long time ago. These global cycles take about 410 years. So we started in 1615. The cycle's going to end in 2027. Now, background frequency is something that most people don't pay much attention to because they don't know about it and they don't know how to pay attention to it. It's like what happens in the transiting field. In the transiting field, the transit of the planets. I can remember going back to my very, very first experiences as a teacher of human design. I had a group that I was teaching in Ibiza. I think it was in 1993. And there was a transit of the nodes. And the 4323, the central channel from the ajna center to the throat, was being defined by the nodes of the moon. Now, the nodes can stay 3 months, 3.5 months in a channel. And in gates, and in this case a channel because the opposition forms a channel. And basically, bless you, it meant that everybody on the planet had imprinted into them in the transiting field this capacity of the 4323. And basically this is the channel of structuring. It's a channel that's individual, it's mental individual, and its expression is I know or I don't know. And basically it leads to a lot of people saying I know, I know, I know. And it leads to a lot of chatter, because after all, it's a definition of the ajna center to the throat, so it opens up the throat for all kinds of communication. So I said to my students, I had 3 of them. I took them to a cafe in the local village around noon hour, around lunchtime. The transit was going to change. I think it was like 20 after noon that day. So I wanted them to be in the cafe to experience the changing of a background frequency. Now think about it. For months prior to that moment, there were all these people on the planet that were given this channel because it was in the transiting field. So all of them were running around with their I know, 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 and it was, So we're sitting in this cafe and there's this incredible buzz. A lot of people in the cafe and there's this incredible buzz. The background sound of many different kinds of voices in conversation. And in the case of that cafe, many languages being interspersed, so it really sounded like Babylon. And we're sitting there waiting, and I said, wait, you'll hear it. So we sit there and we wait. And the transit comes, it's at some point. I'm clocking the damn thing. And the transit comes, and all of a sudden, there is this absolute moment of silence. The 80%, 85% of the people in that cafe who had their ajnas, their minds connected to their throats, lost that connection in that moment. all of them who had become accustomed over the last 3 months of blurting things out and talking all the time, now they were going to get their sore throat because after all they were doing it on transit energy, and all of a sudden it was here, and it was absolute silence. Now it didn't last long. A second, a second and a half, this kind of sudden stop where you think the world has stood still, and then slowly this frequency comes back, but it's never the same. It's not the same because they all lost their voice. Only those after that actually had throat connections were being able to empower all of that. Now that's just the nodes as a background frequency. Think about what it's meant for us as humankind to have a background frequency that's been with us since 1615, since, Shakespeare's plays were being performed at the Globe. Since then, we have been in the same background frequency. Now, part of that background frequency is the channel 4037, the channel of community. So basically, we've been living in an era in which the communal bargain has been established. And we see all that since 1615. We got all the basic institutions that we recognize today. Our governmental institutions, educational institutions, healthcare institutions, all of these various things have arisen out of this background frequency that says we have an obligation to our neighbors. Think about the United Nations, the NGOs, all of these things that go on the planet, the do-gooders, they want to save dolphins, babies, elephants, whatever the hell it is. All of this is because of the background frequency, not because we're nice. Because anybody who knows humans knows that fundamentally we're not. We're dangerous creatures, after all. And we are always creatures that, the veneer is being controlled by the culture and the programming. So think about this background programming. Not only was it background programming that created a bond in community, but the other two gates, the 9 and the 16, the skills and the potential to focus on detail, meant that all of the things that we got to discover, the arts, the sciences, all of those things automatically were applied to the community. In other words, the beginnings of democracy, the beginnings of democratic education, the beginnings of democratic medicine. In other words, the scientific skills that were created out of the 9 and the 16 suddenly became applied through the 4037. In other words, the community, if you're going to go to the moon, you have to explain to the community what good it's going to be for them. Do you remember all of that? What good is this? We're investing all this money and going to the moon. What does it do for us as people? So we've got this background frequency that says we're all in a community together. It's all a bargain. We have to look after each other. We have to trust each other. And we need the trains to run on time. Right? Think about this city. Think about how many bargains make it possible for any human being to survive here. Think about how much food has to be trucked into this city every day. Just the food. Distributing the food. Getting it to the right places. Being able to get rid of the garbage afterwards. It goes on and on and on and on. All the services that you have. All these things that you have. This is this whole bargain structure of community that's been established by a background frequency. Now in 2027, it's going to end. That frequency is going to go away. And like those people in the cafe, where suddenly there was silence, this frequency is going to go away, and the way in which our planet operates is never going to be the same. It isn't. And the next cycle that we're moving into, which is called the cross of the sleeping phoenix cycle, the next cycle that we enter into is a cycle that's deeply, deeply individual. The cycle we're in now is tribal collective. In other words, let's share, let's support each other, let's worry about all those babies that are in Central Africa that are having a bad day, all of this stuff. It's all part of the frequency we have now. When you get to 2027, you're not going to see it. You're already seeing the decay. I mean, after all, this cycle started in 1615. We're only 18 years, 17 years away from the change of the cycle. You can already see the deterioration. That is, no matter how much we try as a community to save everything, we can't. That our capacity to be able to just protect children from diarrhea is limited, let alone anything else. I mean, it's not like were able to do the job, and those things are deteriorating. They're all deteriorating. See, human design came into the world for the individual, because we're about to enter into a historical phase in our evolution in which authority is not something that's going to be guaranteed from above. This is what we've been living with 1615. Since 1615, we have been transferring authority to all kinds of collective tribal institutions. Those collective tribal institutions that determine how we're going to be educated, how we're going to perform religiously, how we're going to perform in terms of our bonds with others, what the rules are going to be, all that stuff, layers and layers and layers of it, how we're going to be fit into the society that you've got millions of people living in this city, and it's amazing they don't all kill each other, after all. I mean, rats would. And the only thing that keeps all of us being relatively civilized is the underlying bargain that's been the background frequency that says that we're all in this together and we've got to help each other out and, all of this stuff. And it's so interesting. Human beings really think that that's coming out of them. That we're really nice, wonderful creatures, and this is really part of us, that we're really like this. It's a background frequency. If you go to the frequency before that, which was much darker, you'll see that we weren't so nice. And the basic, purpose and the way things worked out in the homogenized world were very different. We're constantly within the hold of the program. As we move forward, the only thing that we have to protect us is our own individual authority. It's why this knowledge is here. It's why I don't worry about my children and what's going to happen to them when we get beyond 2027 and we step into another age, because they're going to be equipped because they can operate out of their own authority. And this is what's going to break down, and it's something that's already breaking down. It's why projectors are here. Think about the way that it works. Everybody assumes that the internet, which is really a delightful thing, and human design's deeply indebted to it, that the internet is somehow something that's going to stay with us. There's this assumption that it's going to stay with us. In the same way, there's this assumption that these megalopolises, that have sprouted out, places like Shanghai with 35 million people living in a city, that somehow we're going to be able to maintain all of this. We're not. What happens in a place like this when they don't deliver the food? What are you going to do? Who are you going to be able to trust? Who is going to look after you? Who's going to bring that food to you? You have to see that all of these things that we live with, we take for granted. We take for granted the result of the background frequency that has locked us all into being, one planet, one earth, all connected, that we're all here to help each other, that we're all here to live in peace and all that stuff. And that all we have to do is, make good deals with each other, negotiate, diplomacy. See, you take it for granted, and it's not something to take for granted. It's going to disappear. It's just going to disappear. We're going to enter into another age like we've done every 400 plus years or so, forever. And it is the background frequency that's going to determine the framework of our lives. And we're going to enter into a zone in which there isn't going to be an underlying thing that says we have a bargain with each other, that we need to support each other. The cross of the sleeping phoenix is not about support. It isn't. It's about, excuse me, I'm busy now. That's the future. Excuse me, I'm busy now. No, I don't have time to look after you. I'm busy now looking after me. We're entering into a very different age. And it doesn't mean, by the way, that on 2027, all of a sudden, the past is going to disappear. There's going to be this radical overnight change. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't. It'll mean that all of the people born up till 2027, when they die, you really get to see the full change of the cycle. Most of us won't get to see that full change. But anybody that lives into this next era will begin to see all of the symptoms of a transformation or a change in the era taking place, because it's going to be all around us. You're beginning to see the early examples of this at national levels, where you're going to get a lack of internationalism, the rise of tariffs and all of these things that isolate countries away from each other. That these relationships, these friendships, these bonds are things that are not going to last. Human design is not about the we and the us, which is why projectors are very important. Resources. We assume that if we need information, we can Google it. What happens exactly? What happens when the lights go out, eh? No, really, have you ever thought about that? I mean, I lived in a very primitive environment for nearly a decade where there was no electricity. And electricity is a miracle. All of a sudden there's all these things you can do. You take a modern person in this way of life here and you turn off the electricity, and the only thing you get is a rise in the birth rate. No, really. Remember the famous blackout in New York, eh? 9 months later, nothing but babies, eh? Humans, eh? When the lights go out. Funny creatures. Anyway, you have to grasp something about where we are going. This whole business about you're unique and you have a differentiated potential, it's because nobody else can do that for you. Nobody else is going to be able to provide you with what you can provide for yourself through your own authority. We're not going to have institutions that are ultimately going to protect us. Institutions that say, let me take the authority for you. Let me do things for you. This is basically the way in which we have been living for hundreds of years, in which so many things about our decisions in life have been stripped from us because there have been these organized rules that have been established, and others have authority over us, and that we go seeking authority from others. It is one of the most important things to understand about this work is not just simply to establish your own authority, but be able to provide the potential of unique authority to your children, and your children's children, to be able to understand what it takes to be able to live on this plane without being responsible or indebted to any other force. Until you get to that place, you're not really free. I mean, you're not. You're caught in the trap, and if the trap changes, you're really blown away. You just are. There are going to be all kinds of human beings who are going to be at a deep loss when this whole cycle changes. Think about all the people in the world that are dependent on international communal charities and services. I mean, you have a dependency on this planet of billions of people who are dependent on others to provide for them. Totally dependent on others to provide for them. And those others are providing for them not because they are wonderful creatures, because it's not like that. It's the way in which the background frequency has conditioned them. It's conditioned them to support the community, even if that community gets extended to being a global community. And we're going to work for you. The 4037, the 40th gate is the love of work, the work for the community. So there they are. We're working for the community. We're working for those poor people over here. We're working for those sick people over here. We're working for that. When the background frequency changes, nobody's going to do that. The only people that are going to continue to do that are people who naturally have the 40-37. They're going to be the last do-gooders on the planet. You know? Everybody's going to be able to point a finger at them. There they are. There they are. Look at them doing good, fools, you know. Trying to save the world, you know. Trying to save pandas, you know. You realize that pandas eat only one kind of shoot of bamboo? That's so fucking inefficient. I mean, that really is. It's really easy to get rid of pandas. No, you get rid of that shoot, they're gone. Eh? That's why I love being an omnivore. I mean, no matter what food you take away from us, we humans will find something else to eat, you know? Anyway, sidetrack. It's one of the things that fascinates me the most about my studies at complex auric levels is that you begin to see that so many things we attribute to our own nature is not our own nature. I mean, the rise of democracy is coincidental to this cross of planning. You know, democracy is something that is very, very fragile. It really is. It's totally connected to the background frequency that we live with. It just is. And you see, background frequencies change. They do. And the only thing that can be consistent is who you are. Literally. If you're going to navigate in this plane that's coming, you know, you're going to have to navigate as yourself, because there's nobody there that's going to be ready, other than the few do-gooders, you know, that's going to be ready to say, okay, I'll take on the responsibility for your decision-making. You know, I'll tell you what to do. You know, I'll tell you where to go. So we're going to have a dilemma. One of the dilemmas that we're going to have is that the way in which information is available is going to change. We have dependencies on the way in which information works. I mean, after all, we lived through an era where we were all dependent on, you know, the Library of Alexandria as an example. You know, these collections of all of this information. And these are things that disappeared. You know, we have this huge internet, you know, this web-based information zone. But the fact is that what keeps all of this going is cooperative, communal work. It's what keeps it going. It's the only thing that keeps it going. Because there's all these bargains that are there. You know, that person that has a job in that infrastructure has a job because somebody else has a job, because somebody else has a job, because somebody else. You know, they're all working in a vast communal support mechanism in which there's a contract that binds them all together. That's the background frequency. It's why since 1615, this is the only time that we've had lawyers. I mean, I don't mean to make a bad lawyer joke, but, you know, we've had lawyers because we're living in an era of the bargain and the contract. The 40-37 is all about the bargain and the contract. And out of that, we get all of the legalities and the laws and all of these things that have emerged during this cycle. And laws only work if the community supports them. And the moment that there is no community infrastructure, what's a law? If you're operating out of your own authority and you're an anarchist like me, that's delicious. It's like, Jesus, it's about time. For a lot of people, the idea is frightening. You know, because we have this social contract that we all assume is our right. Is our right. You know, the modern social contract has emerged in this time of the cross of planning. And we take it all for granted, even when it's nonsense. You know, we're all born equal. That is never something I understood. We're all born. I think that's true. Beyond that, the equal stuff, I don't know about that, because we're all born with this and that. You know, we're all born different, whatever the case may be. But you have to see that throughout this whole period, we're all born into a social contract. And not that all the social contracts are nice. You know, the social contract that says that you have to have, you know, clitoral or penal circumcision isn't a nice contract. You know, there are social contracts that say that if you steal, you know, you lose your hand. You know, I mean, There are all kinds of social contracts that we have that aren't all necessarily lovely, but this is what we live by. And the social contract is only there because of the frequency that we live in. It's going away. And it's why projectors are here. You're here to be guides. And what's going to happen as we move into this next era is that there's no organized control over the way in which humanity deals with each other. There isn't. There isn't. And that's quite a thing to think about. And the way we're going to be educated, the way in which we are going to be able to fulfill our potential on this plane is that we have to know how to operate correctly as ourselves, how to have the correct authority, and at the same time, to be able to have forces that show us how we can work together. That's projectors. When the background frequency says that we have a natural social contract, nobody has to be responsible for maintaining it. It's just part of the way in which we exist. But the moment that it disappears in the background frame, there's nothing underneath in all of us that says we're all brothers and we're all here to, be together and to help the planet and, blah, blah, blah. Shh. So the direction that we're going to take in the future is a direction that, if it's going to be in any way communal, is going to originate with projectors. Nothing else. Everybody is going to be in it for themselves. This is what happens when we change this frequency. When we enter into the I am busy frequency, everybody is in it for themselves. It's why this knowledge trains people to be able to have their own inner authority so you can navigate in any circumstance. It's like what I was referring to earlier about the potential of what it is to be a projector and the success that you have a right to. Think about that. It's your signature, after all. You got a right to be successful. You can't be successful unless you're radically a projector. Until you're waiting for those invitations. And now, it's not as easy as it will be in that coming tomorrow. Because in that coming tomorrow, all those individuals, do not have a sense of what to do or how to do anything together. They won't. There has to be forces that guide them. This is what the projector is all about. So it is a responsibility of recognition. What does the individual do with their energy? Take the individual generator. You go into the future. You got an individual generator. They have their own authority. Their own authority gives them the capacity to be able to say yes or no to whatever is, asked of them. And yet they're in a background frequency that says you're on your own. So what do they do on their own? They can't know what they do on their own unless they have something to respond to. And you're going to have all these other beings around them that don't care about that. They're all caught up in their own trip. That's why projectors are here to guide. When you see the projector in this day and age, it's hard to see their role because it still looks like it's a manifestor world to lead. It still looks like that. Because we still have this background frequency. So we still have this way in which, the guidance isn't something that becomes an absolute natural necessity, because we live in a world in which everybody has already given up their authority to all kinds of forces that are dictating to them the way their lives are going to unfold. Beginning with your families and their conditioning, the schools you went to, the country you live in, all of that stuff. See, projectors have an extraordinary role to play in maintaining our evolutionary direction by doing the one thing that they do better than anybody else, is recognize how energy should be applied. Because again, it goes back to the core of what it is to be a projector. You're here to guide energy. It's what you're here to do. And because the background is going to take away the strength of these institutions, and slowly but surely over decades they will fail and crumble, then not being able to have that established authority around you where you can give up who you are and have all kinds of things direct you, that if it isn't for the presence of projectors, there's no way that the energy movement into the future is going to be correct. Which means that there's a lot of pressure on educating projectors over the next 20, 30 years in order to make sure that there is enough projectors who are really projectors, who operate correctly, who are ready to take on that role because they will be recognized for it. The other thing is that we have two kinds of minds. One of the deepest levels of work in rave psychology and primary health system is understanding that we're divided between leftness and rightness. If you're somebody that is right-minded, you're really an instrument of the future, because the right-minded being absorbs enormous amounts of information. And so the storage house of our knowledge is not some artificial institution or some virtual institution that's going to store everything. It is all those beings in their rightness, each and every one of them according to their nature, carrying deep sets of information that can be of value, can be tapped into in the future. And so many of those right beings are projectors. I mean, half of all projectors, 700 million projectors, are going to be right-minded. They're the projectors that have an enormous wealth of information that can be tapped into by others seeking guidance. And again, it goes back to simple things. It goes back to projectors being prepared, which means that they have to have intellectually whatever that thing is, that thing that they focus on and master so that they can be recognized for what that is, and to understand that as a natural fractal, every single projector has those beings that are waiting there in their lives for guidance. They're waiting to be guided. Now, you can't push that river and go tell them. You have to wait for those invitations, but they are there and they are waiting, and it's going to be more and more as we move further. When the manifester steps into the next stage, in the next age, you won't see them anymore. They'll be off on their own trip. That's what manifestors do. And basically they'll turn their back on, the generators and their trip and all that stuff, because it's the end of their line. And the only thing that's going to be able to organize humanity as it moves forward at all the basic levels from survival upward is going to be projectors and their innate capacity to guide groups, to give guidance. You become the substitute of what the background frequency was. That background frequency that provided everybody with a way of operating together. Once that's gone, it becomes the role of the projector. I mean, and if you have to see, if you don't recognize that in yourself and live that, you never get it. You don't. If you don't live as a projector and operate purely as a projector, you're not going to get the recognition. You're not. You're not going to be able to fulfill the promises that's there. And you're going to abandon all of those beings that ultimately are dependent on you and will be dependent on you, or projectors into the future, being dependent on them for guidance that isn't going to be there because the projectors are going to be lost in not being projectors. And then you have chaos. Truly, then you have chaos. It's not like projectors are a small minority. There's not. There's a huge number of projectors. They're here to fulfill this responsibility. And now is the time to find out who you are. And now is the time to begin to experiment with living the projector's life. Those projectors that get to see what invitation really means. Because until you really live it, you don't get it. The slide I talk about. When you really get that, it changes the way in which everybody sees you. The way they feel about you, the way they connect to you. Because you stop being some kind of homogenized, human. You stop being like them. You start being like what you are, which is a projector. A very, very, very different kind of being. And you see, you're the ones that are here to let the generators know not only is life about responding and reacting, but it's about seeing that life provides for the projector-generator connection. It does. Now, when you think about it, 90% of humanity are projector and generator. And I teach both of them, wait for life to deliver. It really says a lot about life. Only manifestors are stupid enough to think that they can make things happen, which is why they spend most of their lives being angry. When you really see that, you see the deep mystical nature of what it is to be us on this plane. There isn't anything to do. It's what I always loved about the Druid saying, do without doing and everything gets done. This is the magic of what it is to be a projector. It all gets done, so let it get done. Be aware. Allow these things to come to you, no matter where you are in your life now. This is the point at which you open up the door to being a real projector. You wait for invitation. You do your doing, whatever that happens to be. And you wait for your life to deliver, because it will. Until you're in that place, you cannot serve the other. You can't. Because they will not take your guidance. They will only try to enslave you and get your success for themselves. So we have a future that demands, that this whole swath of humanity that carry this projector label, that they're going to carry the responsibility to move this species forward over the next 410 years and beyond, because that's what you're here for. And I know in so many ways for all of you, it's not really the point. I know that. I happen to like history and evolution and all those things. And, when you're concerned about your life and so forth and so on, and your own mind unity and all of this stuff, that it doesn't really seem to matter that that's really what it's all about. But, the very quality of your personal life, the way in which your life is going to unfold, all of this is dependent on whether or not you're going to see it as a projector. And not see it through the filter of, your disconnect to the way in which life has worked for you. And not being part of how everybody else is conditioned. You're here to be so different. And when I see projectors, I step into this room and I feel your aura. I know how different that is. This is a very odd thing to have so many projectors in a room. And for me, in terms of frequency, you guys aren't giving me anything. It's very interesting, if I'm in a room with generators, when I walk out at the end of the day, I could teach for another 8,000 hours. You're projectors. You're that's not what you're about, nor is it what you should be about. You're not here to be like the others on this plane. You're not. And you're not here to be caught in the traps of all of that. The material traps, the energy traps, all of that stuff. You're not. You're really here to be, the high priestesses and priests of the energy flow. You're here to raise your hands in the air and it's all there. And the capacity to see it. Because I think the thing that's most frightening to me about projectors is how blind they are. Blind. And here they are supposed to be here for recognition. And they don't see it. And you're here to see. You're really here to see things. You're really here to recognize at a profound level, unlike anyone else. And you're really here to recognize the other and their limitation. You're here to be able to recognize when the other needs guidance. You're here for all of that. And you're here not to worry about what you do about recognizing. Because it's not up to you to set up an agenda about what you do with what you recognize. It's about realizing that invitation will show you what you recognize is of value to the other, because that's what they will select. You know that kind of thing where you want to tell a person one thing and they ask you something else? Answer the something else. Don't worry about what you want to tell them. You know, you're here to be invited. Enjoy the invitations. And you see, when you live that, you begin to see how others see you, really see you. You know, and it only happens when you allow the invitation to come to you. Otherwise, you'll never get to see that. You'll always be fooled. All right, on that wonderful note, which gives you, you know, this moment of sheer delight and joy, this sense of self-contentedness and future, you know, I'm so glad to imbue you with this warmth and wonder. It's just the right thing for lunch. Exactly. Take a walk in the cold world. To all of you that are out there, we will have an hour and a half break, so we'll see you back later.